When I hear security, one of the first things I think about is controlling access to my systems, email, my computer, and various other things. But what does that actually entail? Find out right now.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Well, hello everyone, and well, guess what? We're going to be talking about access control and passwords, and well, I think we just go ahead and get started. Daniel, I hear passwords. Let me run something by you. You're a security guy. Yeah. I got a password I've been using all over the place.
I've already heard a problem.
Yeah. It's password with an @ symbol, 1/2/2019. That should be good to go, right?
Yeah. Well, if you mean good to go as in I will easily break into your system, then yes, good to go.
I should probably hold on a second. I need to do some things.
While he does that, let's address that elephant in the room of Justin's password. Obviously, we're having a ha-ha here. It's just a little bit of fun, but it is meant to elicit the idea that's going on. And Justin, I think you're hitting the nail on the head through rhetoric and hyperbole that passwords are a weak link. It is something that we have to deal with, though. It is in our everyday lives. So what are you going to do, right? Well, what are you going to do? You can attempt to set a more secure password than what we just heard. Because if you're hearing things like, let me just throw this out there. If your password is winter 2019 or winter 2020 or spring 2020 ! Or spring 20, something to that effect, that's not good. And we need to figure out why it's not good and what we can do about it.
What if it's my child's birthday?
What if it's your child's birthday?
Yeah.
Still bad.
What if it's my child's birthday and last name?
Still bad, right? Because these are easily guessable.
Yeah. And again, we're having a little chuckle, but
it really does put the spotlight on the issue.
But you said more secure, which is an interesting terminology because people tend to say this is a secure password, but that means it's an end-all be-all.
That's right.
But that's not always true, right?
No, not always true. It can be more secure. Man, you can create a really strong password, and by the definitions that we're going to be using here in just a second, it would be that. It would be a strong password. That doesn't mean it's unbreakable, right? It's not unguessable. So these are things that we have to concern ourselves with when it comes to creating stronger passwords, is that we have to worry about I'll break it down to two different ways in which we attack passwords, right? And how we can bolster up our passwords when we create them so that they're less susceptible to being broken by those mechanisms.
All right, so are we using the ways that we would break in using passwords as a means of defining what a good password is? And if we aren't, what is a good password?
All right, so let's get down to it, right? We've been kind of like dancing around this show for just a second here. Let's go ahead and break it down. What is a good password? A good password would be one that does better or takes longer for a threat actor to compromise, all right? Now that still probably seems a bit shallow for you, but we're going to continue to dive down in. What that means is when a threat actor tries to attack something, authentication, access via a password mechanism, they're going to go for a couple of different ways. They're either going to try a brute force mechanism. I'm just going to start with a character set or a few character sets, start at the beginning and work my way through this entire thing, which can be lengthy depending on how the password is set up, right? Or they're going to try a dictionary attack, which is another type of brute force technically, but basically I have a list of things that I'm going to try as your password and see if anything matches up, right? Because if I input the correct password, the system is going to say, it must be you. You have the right thing, and it's going to allow me in. So that's typically the two ways in which an attacker attempts to gain access through a password-protected system. So how can we protect both, right? So whether it be a dictionary or whether it be that more standard brute force type of attack. Well, when it comes to brute force, we have to think of how that's being done. I'm going through a character set. I'm trying to get to the end of that character set, and in between the start and the finish of that is your password.
All right, Daniel, let me just interject here real quick. We've been using the term character set, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with what a character set actually is.
Yeah, no problem. Let's define that really quickly. We're just talking about uppercase letters, lowercase letters, special characters. So this is like the @ symbol, $, exclamation point. There's a specific character set that's typically labeled as special or other that you would just think that top row of keys right there on your keyboard with the shift key held down. Any of those typically fall in line of the special character set. So the more of those types of set you can use, of course, there are others as well that most people don't typically use. You can use them if you like, but it could make your life more difficult. And we don't want to make the process too difficult that even we can't use it. So you got to find that sweet spot of character sets, but employing multiple of those character sets plus sufficient length to the system. I usually recommend at least a 12 character password. That makes the brute forcing mechanism take so long that it is quite likely that you've changed your password by the time it would be broken, which is a very, 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 very long time at that point. Of course, the longer it is, the more time you have, right? So there's brute force dealing with brute force. So I know I need to make it long, I need to make it complex. But dictionary, I can have a long and complex password. If it's in a dictionary file that a hacker is using to attack your access, it's still going to work. So we also want to make it something that's not normal, if that makes sense. Let me put it this way. I typically just say my advice is use a passphrase instead of a password. Get into the idea of these are going to be, because phrases are long, they'll be complex. You can add special characters into them as you like. Numbers as well, right? There's another character set you could throw in there. If you comprise a passphrase, which is not going to be typically found in a dictionary file, something that you'll easily remember, couple of different character sets involved, now you're protected against both brute force and dictionary attacks. Should keep you out of the weeds from those threat actors.
All right, Daniel, I think I have a pretty good handle on that. Though we jest, my passwords are typically really long and
Yeah,
use
he's good. He's
many
good.
character sets. However, I know a bunch of people that I used to work with that I could tell them and tell them and tell them, and they would still have Spring 2019 as their password. How do we help those individuals? How do we shepherd them along to utilize a good password?
That's a great question. One of the easy answers for that is security awareness training. But as you pointed out, that's not always effective with our users, unfortunately. It's just the way it is. People are people, and we got to deal with them. Otherwise, what's the point of the system altogether? People want to use them. And not everybody is as astute or they understand or they got the buy-in or whatever. So they're going to continue to try to just make their lives easier. And that's understandable. Okay? But as people who are trying to secure an environment, we now have to set some policy. So this is where password policies will come into play. If we set a sufficient policy that will, as Justin so aptly put, shepherd them, kind of help them say, hey, that password's not great. Now, of course, I've been at the end of those password policies going, oh, frustrating, I can't create. And we do see that, again, this is all about a balancing act of trying to find the best for your environment. But what we're trying to do is trying to give them, say, hey, it's not complex enough, or you're not meeting those length requirements that we think are really going to keep us secure, or you don't have enough character sets, right? This is found in a dictionary. We're running, that's something we might add as our security policy, is to check our passwords just to make sure that they're not in a common dictionary. So that being said, we need to set some password policies. How do we do that? How do I make Justin create a better password for himself to keep the entirety of the system more secure? We can do that in a couple of ways. It depends on if you're running Windows systems or Linux systems. If you're looking at that type of access, which is very common, there are mechanisms in both of those. Let's take a look at Windows first. As my machine went to sleep, here we go. Windows. Let's get logged in. And I'll type in my super secure password. There we go. And the first thing we have is the local security policy. This will allow us to set the password policy for anybody that logs into the machine on a local level, right? I'll walk up to the device. I'm logging in to just a machine. I'm not a part of an Active Directory domain, or I am, but I still need to log in locally for whatever reason. If you open the local security policy editor, and you can just search for that inside of the search features inside of Microsoft or inside of Windows, you can see that right under security settings, you have account policies, and the very first point there is password policy. If you go over to the right pane, you'll see all the policies that exist for this control set, right? So we have enforced password history, age, or maximum age and minimum age, both of them, minimum password length, and the password must meet requirements of complexity. And then, of course, they got into some encryption. We won't have to worry about that too much right now. So let's say complexity requirements. You see that I have that enabled. You just double click on these and you can click enabled or disabled. Good news is that when you're working inside, they do a really good job of defining what each of these things do. So if you're a little unsure about that, just take a look at that information section. Password length, I've got 7 characters. This is the default that comes with Microsoft operating systems. So I'd probably want to come in here and increase that to 12 or 15 or whatever I think is the best for our environment. You can set it to 7. You can set it to 6. You're probably asking for trouble, though, if you do that. I've heard it said, I was listening to a podcast of security, podcast of penetration testers, and they were talking about how, man, we hardly ever get into a system via a vulnerability anymore. Like, I couldn't remember the last time I had remote code execution via some exploits, some ODay. No, how do I get in? Passwords, baby. People use bad passwords. They're too short, they're not complex enough, easily guessable, easily crackable. So that's what we can come in here and change with this policy. All right, so you can change those ages as well. The minimum password age is so that they can't just go in and go, well, today I had to change my password, and then I'll change it again back to what I wanted it to be before and kind of bypass. You know, if users spent as much time trying to get around the security mechanisms we do to keep them safe as they do actually just working with us, we probably have a lot less trouble in our lives. But there you go. That's Windows. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Unfortunately, with Linux, it can be that easy, but it's not going to be. Right? just laughing.
Yeah. This is one of those things where sometimes in Linux, the settings are just random things that you have to go deep into the documentation and go, how would I have ever known to do that?
Yeah.
Like, how is that a -4?
It's super tough.
Yeah.
And this is one of those times. It's the PAM modules that work with our passwords when it comes to a Linux environment. So here I am, I'm logged in. This is Ubuntu server 1804 LTS. Okay, and it's pretty up to date. I've built this server specifically for this show so we have something to play around with. And if we want to mess with passwords, first thing we need to do is know a couple of files. First, the PAM modules. We need to understand that PAM is what controls our passwords. When we log in, whether or not our password is good enough, if it's going to accept that or not, if there's any requirements, that PAM module is going to do it. And that's the common-passwords module. And that's found in the etc pam.d directory. So let's take a look at that file. I'm just going to cat /etc/ pam.d /common-password. And you'll see a flat text configuration file comes right up. It's Linux, baby. That's how they roll, right? And in here, what you would want to do is add a line with some specific features or adjust a line, which I want to say is right around here. It does say this is the per package module for the primary block. So we got a success one, default ignore. But if that doesn't work, this fallback is right here. So what you would want to do is know what requisite means. It means it's kind of required. There are definitions for each of these terms. So if you really want to understand all the moving parts that go along with PAM and how you can really fine tune that system, just man pam.d and it should help you out with that. But in here, we could add things like ucredit equals -1. Why it's -1, I couldn't tell you. But if you want to say you must have at least one uppercase character, you put ucredit equals -1. There's that. Same goes with dcredit, which is a lowercase character. If I want X amount of D characters at least, then I would say dcredit equals -1 or 4, however many I think it needs to be. All right, we also have other. So if you wanted to reach into other character set, then you would do ocredit equals and pick your poison. You can also do the minimum number, how long that password needs to be. So that would be min class. So min class equals 12. Min class equals 8. Whatever, again, suits your environment. There you go. You want to definitely get familiar with this pam.d/common-passwords file. And again, another one you might want to look at is man pam_Unix. Can be helpful. It's got some more information about these PAM modules and how they work and how authentication works using that system. There you go. That is setting that wonderful stuff. I think there was one more file. Oh yeah, I did have one more. I wanted to cat this one for you. Cat. I'll just do a cat of /etsy/pam.d/login. And you can see that this is pulling these includes for Unix accounts. So including common.account, common.session, and of course common.password. All these things kind of work together to try to help you create that robust password access system.
So you said robust, but you actually said something a little while back. If users would spend as much time just adhering to our password policies instead of trying to find a way around it, then we would be better off. Here's one for you.
Okay.
One of my favorite ones is we had pretty strong, I had a previous job, we had a pretty strong password policy, but you could walk into pretty much anybody, I was a teacher, you could walk in and flip a keyboard. And you know what, 12-character password, not really effective if it's written on the bottom of a keyboard.
You make a good point, sir.
How do we help mitigate those issues?
Yeah, because it is going to happen. And it's so funny that is a stereotype and a joke kind of among the security community because it still happens. He is exactly right.
It still happens.
We're not talking about war games here where Matthew Broderick pulls out the thing and there's the pencil password to the computer system in his high school. They're still doing that. It's still occurring to this day. So what do? Multi-factor authentication can come to the rescue when it comes to this. This will allow us to make our access systems much more robust. So much and so that entities such as Google have used them to such a great extent that they've reported like zero access or unauthorized access from threat actors for X amount of time. It has done wonders for large corporations, small corporations, individuals, you name it. It's an easy thing to implement in a lot of ways on many systems. If it is available, I highly recommend that you employ two-factor or multi-factor authentication. And all that means is that I have another means to verify who I am when I tell the system I am Daniel. If I say I'm Daniel, it goes, cool. How do I know you're Daniel? Well, I've got a password. Let me type that in. Great. You know what? That is Daniel's password. But if you're really Daniel, you're going to get a text on your phone. It's going to have a code that I've randomly generated. It only lasts for 5 minutes. And you'll type that into this box. And now I really know. It's the old trust but verify, right? It's trusting that you are who you are, but we're going to verify that even further with a second mechanism or a third or fourth mechanism even. And the more factors that you employ, the more secure it can be. Again, it goes back to the idea of, is this more than I need? You got to find that balancing act. But multi-factor or two-factor can really bolster your security.
And I've heard people argue against this because they're like, it's really cumbersome. It's too much weight. And to some extent, I understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
So not all of my accounts have MFA. However, the things that could possibly financially ruin me, could maybe steal my identity or have impacts that are way beyond what I'm comfortable with, do have MFA. But if it's like a throwaway email account, nah, doesn't have MFA. My Amazon AWS accounts do though.
Yep.
So every time I get a text message or I whoop open Google Authenticator or something, and I'm getting a one-time password that does expire. Now, there's many ways to do this. We can have like a biometric scanner. You can get a text message. You can actually have like a YubiKey.
Yeah, YubiKeys are great because they're cheap. The weight issue isn't really a factor at that point because it's so small and light that it wouldn't really burden you. But most people have their phone on them, so if you have some sort of authentication mechanism on your phone, that's typically the easiest way to go, like to ease the pain or burden of trying to implement two-factor, because once it's done, it's done. You just gotta get that text, type in that number, and you're off to go. You know, you've got Google Authenticator, cool, there's my number, I type it in, and I'm good to go. You did talk about how, I did want to mention this because you kind of brought it up and I'd forgotten about it, which is password reuse. Very dangerous idea where you have a password that you use in multiple places. Because if one of those mechanisms do not have strong security, you could be opening yourself up. And now that's what we're trying to avoid with this whole thing. But good stuff, Justin. I think that's a good place for us to stop when it comes to passwords. We're going to be seeing all sorts of things like this as we continue throughout the series. But now we have a very good foundational understanding of what makes stronger passwords in our environments.
All right, we have a good start on security, but you know what? We're just absolutely getting started. But we're going to go ahead and call it a day for this one. So signing off for IT Pro TV, I've been your host, Justin Dennison.
I'm Daniel Lowry.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.